Hey guys, this is Luke on Sean's channel. Today I'll be going over yet again my new and improved Sky Striker build. I fucking love Sky Strikers. They are my favorite deck of all time. I like messing around with the deck and trying to find new ways to make it really competitively viable and keep up with the current meta. This build right now is the one I'm currently playing competitively. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. Of course, I'm running 3 copies of Raye. Raye is arguably one of the best starters you can ever get for a deck. So what Raye does is she has 2 effects, primary one being that is a quick effect. You can tribute this card special one Sky Striker Ace monster from your extra deck into the extra monster zone. But Raye also has a very good recycling effect where when she's in the graveyard and one of your Sky Striker Ace monster is destroyed by one of your opponent's card effects or battle, she's able to bring herself out from the graveyard. Both these effects are only once per turn, but still, it's absolutely great recycling. Raye is definitely an essential to run at 3 in this build. We run only 1 copy of Roze. 1 copy of Roze is all you need. Not only is she good for a starter if you don't have Raye in your hand, because she is just another Sky Striker monster, you're able to normal summon and link into your more powerful link monsters. But also the fact that she is the light attribute Sky Striker monster that we need in this build in order to get the full effect of our Sky Striker Mobilize linkage. So 1 copy of Roze is more than enough for this build. I definitely run it only at 1. If you want to run it at more, go ahead, experiment with ratios, always mess around with this build, but I find 1 to be the most optimal. Now we're running 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom, definitely one of the most universal hand traps in the entire game, so 3 copies of it is very, very good for the build. I also like 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird. Droll and Lockbird not only is it very good because it's good at shutting down a bunch of combo decks that like to add a bunch of cards to their hand, but also we're pretty much a combo deck that likes to add a bunch of cards to our hand. So running Droll is still very, very good, especially because we run Crossout Designator in this build. We're able to use it if one of our opponent tries to Droll us. So 3 copies of Droll, not only is it good for interfering with our opponent, but it's also good protection with our Crossout Designator so we don't get Drolled ourselves. Only with the 1 copy of Ghost Ogre in the main deck. This is most just because I hate when people Ghost Ogre Kagari, because it kind of destroys the flow of the combo. So I only run the 1 copy of Ghost Ogre in the deck for our Crossout Designator plays. But also Ghost Ogre is just a very good hand trap overall, so it's definitely not an issue running it in the main deck. I also run 2 in the side, but we'll get into that later. But 1 copy in the main deck just to fill out this 40 card deck. Now, last ban list was very kind to us, so we have 2 copies of Engage. Engage is probably one of the best searchers you can get for a archetype at all. Engage is able to add us any Sky Striker card from your deck to your hands. If you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard, you get to draw an extra card. One thing I should say about almost every Sky Striker card, spell card, is that you need to control no monsters in your main monster zone to activate them, and they have mostly 2 effects. Most of the time the effect is just the primary one, and then the secondary one comes after filling out a certain condition. Most of the time that condition is having 3 or more spells in the graveyard. So Engage, its first effect being that it can search, and then the secondary effect, if it fills out the condition of having 3 spells in the graveyard, we're able to draw an extra card. So 2 copies of Engage, bring Engage to 3, it is so fucking good. 3 copies of Sky Striker Mobilize Linkage. Linkage is absolutely great. If we don't have Raye or Roze in our opening hand, we're able to use Linkage in order to go into our Sky Striker monsters from the extra deck. And the fact that it's a quick play spell, we're even able to chain it to our normal spells in order to send those normal spells to the graveyard in order to bring out one of our Sky Striker monsters from the extra deck. Linkage also has a secondary effect, which I find to be very, very good. If it fills out the condition that we have both a light and a dark Sky Striker monster already in the graveyard when this resolves, that Sky Striker monster we bring out with Linkage gains 1000 attack. So 3 copies of Linkage, very important for the build. 3 copies of Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor is absolutely great. One thing I really love about Sky Strikers, and pretty much a lot of my favorite decks, what I like about them is when they can pretty much do anything. And one of the most important things, a a deck can do is effect negation. So Widow Anchor is able to negate negate the effects of face-up monster your opponent controls, and also being a Sky Striker spell, it has a second condition where if you have 3 or more spells in the graveyard when Widow Anchor resolves, you can actually take control of that monster you just negated with Widow Anchor. So 3 copies of it, very, very good for this build. Newly unlimited, but I only run 2 copies of it, is Multirole. Multirole is very good, mostly for its secondary effect, which I'll get into a second, but the first effect, it can still play a big factor, especially when we're putting it with our Area 0. First effect of Multirole is that you can target one other card you control, send that card to the graveyard, and then your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to your spell cards. So this can be very good when paired with Area 0, because if Multirole is able to destroy your Area 0 and send it to the graveyard, not only do you get the effect off Multirole where your opponent can't interact with your spell cards for the rest of the turn, but Area 0 also gets a graveyard effect where if it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Sky Striker monster from your main deck, being Raye. So this is a very good, easy way to get a Raye. Just another way to get a Raye, which is always a good thing. Going back to Multirole really quick, it has a secondary effect that once per turn during the end phase, you can set Sky Striker spells to your field with different names from your graveyard up to the number of Sky Striker spell cards you activated this turn while this card is face up on the field. So this is very, very good recycling. Only downside is that those spells that you reset do get banished after you activate them, but still very good to get some recycling. Then jumping back over to Area 0 really quick, its first effect, which is still very good, can get us out of tight spots on occasion, but again it's a bit of a gamble, is that Area 0 can target one other card you control, excavate the top 3 cards from your deck, and if you do, you can add one excavated Sky Striker card to your hand and shuffle the rest into the deck. Then if you excavate a Sky Striker card, send that targeted card to the graveyard, which can be very good. It's a bit of a gamble though. I mostly use Area 0 in coordination with Multirole, to use Multirole to pop the Area 0 in order to get out a Raye, but still, these are very good ratios for very good cards to run the deck. 1 copy of Afterburners. If there's any Sky Striker spell that I'd consider running more than just the 1, it's definitely Afterburners. Afterburners is that you can target 1 face-up monster on the field and destroy it, and if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard, you can destroy 1 spell trap on the field. This is very good because since it's a Sky Striker card as well, it's pretty much searchable removal, which is always good for any deck. 1 copy of Ego Booster. Ego Booster has the effect that you can target 1 face-up monster on the field that targets unaffected by card effects except for its own this turn, and also since the Sky Striker card has a secondary effect, if you have 3 more spells in the graveyard, that monster you target cannot be destroyed by battle this turn either. 1 copy of Hornet Drones. Hornet Drones is a good way if we don't have our starters in the likes of Raye, Linkage, or Roze. Hornet Drones is able to special summon a Sky Striker token onto the field, which we can use for our link plays. This card is limited, so we can only run it at 1, so 1 copy of Sky Striker Mecha Hornet Drones. As previously mentioned, we run 2 copies of Crossout Designator. Since this deck kind of goes between being a combo deck and also a control deck, Crossout Designator is very, very good because we don't want to get interrupted, we don't want to be ashed, drolled, or Ghost Ogred, so Crossout Designator is very, very good to run this deck. I'm going to run it at 2 because I think that's pretty much all you need. If you want to run it at 3, definitely do it. The only reason why I run it at 2 is because I run it in cooperation with Call by the Grave, so this is the optimal ratio I find for this build. 1 copy of Reinforcing the Army. Raye is a warrior, so it's easier. It's just another way that we can get to Raye. Also, it's another spell in the graveyard, which is never a bad thing to get the full effect of our Sky Striker spell cards. 3 copies of Raigeki. I don't know why this card is unlimited, but it's still very, very funny. Raigeki, as simple as it comes, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Great removal, non-targeting removal might I add. So it's very good to run this deck. It also helps us get to our Linkage OTK. 1 copy of Change of Heart. I find Change of Heart to be very, very good. Most just because we can use it for our link plays, which we have a lot of link 2s that are quite generic enough that we can get rid of our opponent's problematic monsters with links rather than destroying them. And also we have a very nice surprise in the extra deck, which is another reason we run Change of Heart at 1. One copy of Harpie's Feather Duster. Yes, I do main deck this because it's always good to have some sort of main deck spell / trap removal. So one copy of Harpie's Feather Duster is very good for the build. Since that rounds out the spells, I'm just going to go straight into the traps. 3 copies of Imperm. Much like Ash Blossom, Imperm is a great staple. It's one of the most generic hand traps in the game, so running 3 copies of it I find to be very, very good, very essential for the build. And then the final 3 cards of this deck, 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Sky Strikers, we don't build a huge board, so Evenly Matched is a really good tech option. Also, if we're forcing us to go second, which honestly this deck can do very, very well, especially when we're main decking some great board wipers like Evenly Matched and Raigeki. So 3 copies of Evenly Matched, very, very good for this build. Also, the fact that we run Crossout Designator with Evenly in the main deck is never a bad thing. If our opponent tries to evenly us, we have the Evenly Crossout little combo to stop that from happening. Now, going into the extra deck now, 3 copies of Kagari. Kagari is probably my favorite Sky Striker monster. She's great because if this card is special summon, you can target one Sky Striker spell in the graveyard and add it to your hand, which is just really good recycling, especially if that card we're bringing back is Engage, because of course Engage is not once per turn, so it can really build up some great hand advantage. Kagari is also very essential for the Linkage OTK, so 3 copies of Kagari is never a bad thing. 3 copies of Shizuku. Shizuku is very good. I forgot to mention about Kagari is that she gains 100 attack for every spell in the graveyard, which can boost her up to a ridiculous amount. But Shizuku kind of has the opposite effect, where Shizuku lowers your opponent's monsters by 100 attack for each spell in the graveyard. But where Shizuku also differs from Kagari is that Shizuku can add us a Sky Striker spell from our deck to our hand during the end phase of the turn, based on the fact that that Sky Striker spell name is not already in the graveyard. So Shizuku is good for kind of going first. Shizuku most of the time is the end board in order to get us a Sky Striker spell to our hand in order to set us up for next turn. So 3 copies of Shizuku is definitely very, very good for this build. I run 2 copies of Hayate. Hayate is great. Hayate is able to attack directly, which we love. And also, after damage calculation, if this card battled, you can send one Sky Striker card from your deck to the graveyard. That's being a Sky Striker card, so not only can it be a Sky Striker spell, which we can later then add off of Kagari, it can pretty much just be Raye if we brought out this monster with Linkage, so we're able to kind of dump Raye. Which can be great sort of backup in case our plans go very wrong. And also Hayate is great because you can also dump Roze, and Roze in the graveyard is always very great because it sets up our Linkage OTK. That's why Hayate is very, very essential for this build. I only run it at 2, you can run it at 3 if you want, but I think 2 is the most optimal. I also run 1 copy of Kana. If I was to run 3 copies of Hayate, I would replace Kana for the 3rd copy, but I still find Kana to be very, very good in her own right. Not only is it another Sky Striker monster name that we have in our deck, Kana also has the effect that if this card is special summoned, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls, and it cannot attack until the end of your opponent's turn. Which can be very, very good because if your opponent has a big monster which we know can kill us next turn, bringing out Kana is a good way to kind of stop it from doing that. Also, like most things, Kana can also enable us to kind of like win for time in game 3, because Kana also has another effect where each time a Sky Striker card is activated, Kana is able to gain us 100 life points immediately after the card resolves. So Kana is a good way to kind of win for time if it comes down to the wire. Rounding off our Sky Striker monsters in the extra deck, we run 1 copy of Zeke. Zeke, honestly, most of the time I just use when we're stealing our opponent's monsters with Change of Heart or Widow Anchor, and we're able to link it off for a good generic link 2 for this build. So Zeke is very, very good for that, being a link 2. It also has effects that if this card is link summoned, you can target one face-up monster on the field and banish it into your opponent's next end phase, which can be very, very good if your opponent has 2 problematic monsters on the field. You're able to steal 1 link into Zeke and then banish that other monster. Kind of a good board wipe as well. That's the only reason we run Zeke. Now I run 2 of the Charmers in the extra deck as well. Now I will say, this is what the ratio I'm running right now. But in the future, there's a Sky Striker card called Sky Striker Ace Camille, and that card will replace Lyna eventually, just because Camille is a lot better than Lyna. I originally thought I was going to replace Lyna with Sky Striker Azula, which was released in Monsters Revenge earlier in the year, but I still struggle to find Azula to be a good card. To be completely honest, I don't find Azula to be that good. Mostly by the fact that Azula needs to be brought out by both light and dark monsters only. So we cannot use any of our Sky Striker extra deck monsters to link into Azula, which is very problematic. Azula is a great sort of monster removal in battle phase and stuff like that, but I still cannot bring myself to make the argument of that she is a good enough card for this build. I will, however, be replacing Lyna for Camille when Camille eventually comes out, because Camille is just an absolutely crazy card that will definitely be a mainstay staple for all Sky Striker decks, believe me with that. But I think Dharc will probably stay a mainstay no matter what the build. Most just because not only is the Dharc attribute a very generic attribute in a lot of decks, and Dharc is able to steal a dark monster in her opponent's graveyard when he's brought out, but also the fact that if Dharc is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, we can use Dharc's effect in graveyard to search for a Raye, which can be very, very good if we're trying to build up a comeback after using our link plays. So one copy of Dharc, one copy of Lyna for now, but in the future, Lyna will be placed with Camille. I still never see myself running Azula though. One copy of Knightmare Unicorn. This is a very good sort of generic link tree that we can use along with our Dharc or our Lyna. What makes Unicorn great is that there's a lot of monsters that can't be destroyed by card effects. Unicorn doesn't really destroy, it shuffles it back into the deck, so it's a good way to get around that fiasco. And also it's good to have a link tree when we're link climbing into our Accesscode Talker. Using a link tree when you're bringing out Accesscode Talker is very, very good, because when Accesscode Talker is brought out with a link tree, it's able to bring itself up to 5300 attack. Accesscode Talker is really good way to kind of like round off games and finish things off. Mostly just because Accesscode Talker is absolutely great for enabling board wipes and big damage, which can win you the game. Now that was only 14 cards in our extra deck. The little surprise I mentioned earlier is we actually run Zeus in this build. Zeus is very, very good for pretty much any deck, but the reason why we run in Sky Strikers is because we have a lot of ways to steal our opponent's XZs, attack with them, and then overlay for Zeus so we don't have to give back those XZs during the end phase. We can steal our opponent's monsters not only with the likes of Change of Heart, but also with the likes of Widow Anchor. Widow Anchor doesn't lock us out from actually attacking with that monster, so if we're able to use Widow Anchor, steal one of our powerful XZs from our opponent, and attack with it, we're able to overlay for Zeus so we don't have to give our opponent that during the end phase. Especially during the peak of cash format, I was rocking this deck a lot, and I was able to use Widow Anchor to steal an Rise Heart that had a load of material on it, attack with it and overlay for Zeus, and that won me the game right there. So one copy of Zeus is definitely very, very good for the build. I highly recommend playing it. So that rounded off the extra deck. Let's finish things off with the side deck. One copy of Surgical Striker Hamp. This is always treated as a Sky Striker card, and if you control a Sky Striker 8th monster, you're able to use this as a kaiju. Since a searchable kaiju is something I really admire about Cyber Dragons, I'm really happy Sky Strikers finally has the option now. Although I will say that this kind of like has a downside in the fact that we ourselves need to control a Sky Striker monster in order to use this as a kaiju. It's still very good, but because of that, we also run one copy of Gamma Seal on the side as well, just because you never know. Kaijus are very, very good. Always have a kaiju in the side deck, because you never know what bullshit you're going to be facing. So one copy of Gamma Seal and one copy of Hamp is very, very good on the side. As previously mentioned, this is rounding off our playset of Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre is just a great generic sort of hand trap. We already have the final copy in the main deck because not only is it a good hand trap, but also the fact that it can go alongside our Crossout Designator. This is just finishing out the playset. I have the other two inside. Now this next tech option kind of brings Crossout Designator into the mix as well. However, these are still very, very good tech option that we have on the side. because the bestials are just so generic. They can go in pretty much any build whatsoever. I like to have one copy of each in the side. Two reasons for this. One being that bestials can be very problematic if we're kind of facing them in a match. Mostly just because bestials are able to banish our Raye, which is really problematic for us. So if your opponent wants to activate the bestial effect, you're able to use Crossout Designator and banish one of these bestials that will be in the deck in order to negate that effect. But also bestials are very good because they're very good at swarming the field. And of course, you know, if we're swarming the field, we're able to make our link climbing so much easier, which is able to get us into our Accesscode Talker and go in for big damage and end the match as quickly as possible. So I find running one copy of Druid Swarm, Magnamut, Sarnir and Baldrake to be very good in the side deck. But please use this as only a side deck option. I wouldn't main deck this necessarily, just because we never know what way the matchup is going to be like. But one copy of each of the bestials in the side I find to be very good for this deck. You never know with those epoxy back row decks, so 3 copies of Cosmic Cyclone can be very good for the side deck. Sometimes you won't even need this, but I still find it to be very good. Now this is a very funny tech option that I found out and I actually use at locals, is Imperial Iron Wall. 2 reasons why I use this in locals. One, the fact that it just simply says neither player can banish cards. This has a very funny interaction with Multirole. So as you already know, Multirole is able to reset your back row. And then you're able to activate that back row, but the only downside of it is that that back row gets banished. However, under Imperial Iron Wall, that back row does not get banished. It actually goes to the graveyard. Imperial Iron Wall stops any player from banishing cards. And we're able to still activate those cards that we reset off a Multirole, but rather than being banished, they go back into the actual graveyard, which is just really good recycling, benefits us wholeheartedly. Another reason why Imperial Iron Wall is so good is the fact that neither player banishes cards. There's so many decks that really rely heavily on banishing, Kashtira being a big one. I was able to bring out Imperial Iron Wall with an Arise Heart out, and it almost completely shut down my opponent's deck. Another great thing about Imperial Iron Wall is the fact that it simply states neither player can banish cards. Imperial Iron Wall cannot be Cosmic Cyclone. Neither player can banish cards. So Imperial Iron Wall is great because most side deck spell and trap card removal is Cosmic Cyclone, but Cosmic Cyclone is completely shut off by Imperial Iron Wall. So I would definitely run 2 copies of Imperial Iron Wall in the side deck. I find it to be very good, but please be careful with your ratios because, as you already seen, bestials are in our side deck as well, so we don't want to be shooting ourselves in the foot using Imperial Iron Wall while we ourselves have bestials. And finally, I really see this coming, so I run Royal Decree in the side deck, 2 copies of it to round off our side. It just negates all other trap effects in the field. Many reasons for this. One of the main reasons is because I was so sick of losing to Labyrinths. Labyrinths was the big problematic deck that I still can't get my head around beating, especially when they still have Eradicator Epidemic Virus. So 2 copies of Royal Decree was able to shut them down, which I was very happy with. But also it's a great way to shut them down evenly matched as well. So 2 copies of Royal Decree I definitely recommend running in the side. This might be brought up to 3, and this might even be main decked. Just considering with the way the format is going, it seems like Labyrinth might actually be the next best deck. That Butler card that they're getting is going to be absolutely game changing. So Royal Decree is definitely good to stick with the side for right now, but going forward this might actually see itself as a 3 of in the main deck. So that about does it for the build. Please let me know what you think. I love this deck so much. I played with it so many times. I find this to be the most optimal build when we're going forward into this coming format, because God knows what it's going to be like. But this is definitely the build I recommend you guys play. Really try it out, test it, do whatever you can. Please let me know your experiences with it in the comments. Please let me know any suggestions you might have in the comments as well. We love reading them. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please check out all the other content we have. And there's going to be plenty more on the way. So thanks for watching. See you next time.